How you doing? This is Steve Ragan with CSO Online. I'm here with Pablo Breuer. We're at Circle City Con. We're going to be talking about snake oil today. So this weekend, tomorrow, right? You're doing a talk about snake oil in the industry.
Yeah, Saturday morning.
So give me a brief overview. Tell me about your talk.
So one of the challenges that we've got in this field is that a lot of us come into this field, we don't have a computer science background. And so every couple of years there's a threat, there's some new fancy term now, it's fourth generation firewalls or next generation firewalls, and we have to wade our way through all the marketing speak to try to figure out, well, what is this thing, how does it work, and does it actually solve all of our problems? Mm-hmm. So if you're a computer scientist, you get a lot of complexity theory. We take a class called Automata, and it tells us about the types of problems that you can solve with computation, the types of problems you can't solve with computation. And it turns out that most of the problems that we really want to solve in the security field just can't be solved by computers alone.
So for the most part, the entire market is just full of snake oil.
It is full of snake oil, right? And
so when it comes to the type of problems you want to solve and you just can't use technology, what are some examples of that?
So the latest one is that you hear is every product detects zero-day exploits, and they detect all zero-day exploits, and that is computationally impossible. I'll mention it in my talk, but it basically goes against something called the halting problem. So all computers are based on something called Turing machines, Alan Turing, and there's a law in computer science that says that given an arbitrary bit of code in a computer, you can't even tell me if that bit of code is going to stop, let alone if it's going to give you a correct result. And if you can't even tell me if it's going to stop, you surely can't tell me that it's malicious. And so that doesn't mean that we can't tell you that some of it isn't malicious. We can do some of it. We just can't do all of it. So there's no 100%. It was April 16th. There was a press release that MIT said that they could detect 85% of all 0 days. And I got a lot of emails on that, and you took a look at it, and you had to really read the fine print. And what the fine print says is, we detect about 85% of it, but it's up to the human operator at the other end to make the final determination as to whether it's malicious or not. So does it make things better? Absolutely. Does it detect all 0 days? Absolutely not. Does it detect 85%? Well, not really.
Because you still got to rely on the end user to make that.
Because you still have to rely on the end user. And so really the challenge is, it's not that the products are bad and it's not that they're worthless. The trick is to figure out how the product does what it does, and then figure out what assumptions were made when the product was created, so that you can validate those assumptions and say, yeah, those assumptions make sense in my network, and so that product will actually solve one of my problems. Or, hey, I'm not sure that assumption is good, and so I'm going to backstop that with another product. Or, hey, that assumption just makes no sense at all in my operating environment, and so it's just not a good product for me.
Are you seeing any patterns when you look at the products that are in the market and how they're being pitched and hyped up? Obviously, like you said, they're promising to detect APTs, but technology-wise, are you seeing any kind of overlap to where they make this claim and they have this technology, so science is able to say, look, if you're using that technology, then you're going to have a problem, because again, you can't even tell me if it's going to stop, let alone if you're going to. Where are you seeing that, if you are?
So, generally speaking, these security products tend to fall into one of two broad categories. So they're either signature-based or they're heuristic-based, which means it's really a statistical model. The next generation products is really a combination of multiple sensors that do both heuristics and signature-based. So the combination is better, but it's still not a 100% solution. The troubling thing is, pick a vendor, pick any vendor, and go look at their product page for their marquee product. And there is all of this marketing speak in there: heuristic-based, vector-based, cloud-based, multi-level secure, multi-layer hunt, and you read the page and you get really excited about the product. And then you stop and you think about it and you realize that you have no idea what the product actually does or how it does it. But you're willing to fork out a whole lot of money to buy a bright shiny box with some blinky blue lights in it without knowing whether or not it's going to solve your problem.
So here's your setup question. If all this is true, why is the security market booming? Why are people buying all this snake oil?
Well, again, it's not that the products are worthless. A lot of the products are very smart and they're very good if you understand how the products work and what they're doing for you. A lot of the security experts will tell you that you don't want to go all with one vendor because any particular vendor is going to have the same assumptions in all their products. Whereas if you get a best of breed and you get a combination of vendors, it becomes harder to manage, but at least you've got an overlay of assumptions. And so while one product will fail because of an assumption, the product behind it doesn't make the same assumption, so it'll catch it.
Okay, so what is your advice, or what's a takeaway you want the administrators or the ones making financial decisions? What do you want them to know? What's the lesson they need to learn?
So there are a couple of things. So for the customers, I really want them to understand that there's some problems out there, and it's really most of the problems that we care about in security that cannot be solved by automation. It just can't be done. And so the way that the vendors claim that they solve the problem is by making assumptions that help reduce the sample space. So the first thing you need to learn to ask the vendor is, what assumptions did you make? And then the customer needs to validate those assumptions. Hey, that assumption makes sense in my operating environment, or that assumption doesn't make sense in my operating environment. The next thing they need to do is they need to learn to ask the hard questions. I understand that you're saying your product does this. How does the product work? And when they get the sales speak, say, no, stop. Draw me a picture. Explain it to me in a simple fashion. Einstein had that famous quote about, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And unfortunately, that happens a lot. You get the vendors and you get the salespeople, and they're great, but when you start asking hard questions about how the product works, oftentimes they can't explain it to you.
So I know I said it was a big question. Now I want you to tell me a story. What's a pitch you got that just drove you nuts and you kind of wanted to start throwing chairs? What's a horror story?
I'll give you two quick ones. So
Okay.
I had the opportunity to actually go to Silicon Valley and meet with a very large, very well-known security vendor.
Mm-hmm.
And I went there with the senior exec for my employer. And we had the entire C-suite there. So the CTO, the CEO, the CSO, they were all there. And the CTO, who was one of the founding members, brilliant computer scientist, looked at my senior exec and said, our next generation product detects all 0 days. And I looked at him, I said, no, it doesn't. He said, no, it absolutely does. And I said, okay, you've got a background in computer science? He said, yes. I said, halting problem. And he leans back and he goes, I've been doing this for 25 years and nobody's ever said that to me. You're right. We don't detect all 0 days, but we detect a good number of them.
We detect them all because cyber.
Because cyber, right? Cyber, all the things. But once that vendor understood that I knew the right questions to ask, they were willing to, sign an NDA and we'll show you what our secret sauce is and how it works. That became immensely helpful. We ended up actually going with that vendor and buying that product because now we understood the product and how it worked. At the opposite end, I work at a university, and so one of the things I get often asked to do is PhDs will come to me and say, hey, look, I'm working on this research. We think it's useful. Can you look at it? So I'll mention this case study. So they were talking about a vector-enabled, heuristic-based network behavior modeling
Bingo.
system. Yeah, bingo. Yeah. What does that mean? Really, first of all, what does that mean? Can you explain it in English? And what they're talking about is a behavioral-based model, a heuristic network that would understand what normal transactions look like on your network and flag things that looked suspicious. Flagging things that look suspicious is great. We like that. But that is a far cry from the we can detect all 0 days that the PhD was claiming. That's
also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, when it comes to behavioral type flagging and stuff like that, that also assumes that the moment you put it on the network wasn't already compromised and clean.
Correct.
And you're able to actually determine what normal is. I mean,
absolutely.
That's the big hang up.
So you hit on the two, and then the other one is what's called learning bias or boiling the frog. So you've got your heuristic based, and the black hat gets in there and does just a little bit, and it doesn't trip the sensor, and they do just a little bit more and just a little bit more, and before you know it, they think that is normal behavior. But taking that away, there are ways that you can take those behavioral-based models and you can make them work for you. So take an ICS or SCADA system. Why am I picking that one? I'm picking that one because that one is horribly, horribly broken right now. I don't know anybody that has anything good to say about the security for the ICS SCADA. but if you take an ICS SCADA network, it's got a limited protocol. The ICS SCADA protocols are not the entire range of TCP/IP, where you've got to worry about flash and PDF and all of those things. So you've got a circle that is, here are valid messages, and then separate from that, because it is tied to a cyber physical system, it's going to make some valve operate, or it's going to make some fan blow, and those things, that physical component has some limitations, has some physical limitations. It can't go above this speed, or it can't go beyond this pressure, it can't go above this heat, and oh, by the way, you shouldn't increase the RPMs beyond this level. And so that's another circle, and so those two circles overlap, and you go, okay, well, that's a smaller subsection than any one circle. And then the third section, the third circle for overlap is, how does this thing normally operate? This valve should only talk to this controller. If this controller is being talked to by something else, that's anomalous. If the heat up rate or the speed increases beyond the way we'd normally operate this thing, then that's anomalous. So you take those three circles and you do a Venn diagram, you overlap, and you realize that you have dramatically reduced the sample space. Is that going to detect all 0 days? Absolutely not. But what you've done is you've reduced the sample space to now a heuristic model might make more sense, and it might be a lot more useful. So now you take that and you combine it with other products, and you may get a 90% solution.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. I appreciate that. Have a good evening.